Welcome back. We will be looking at the final component in forecasting and finishing the budgeting and budgetary control chapter with this segment. This is learning curves. This is one of the forecasting techniques, and it's important because, especially if you are trying to forecast or if you're dealing with a situation of budgeting and forecasting in a labor intensive environment, then there's learning involved. So, that's where the learning curve effect applies. And this is something you've already looked at in F5, but let's try to understand it very briefly. It's not very complicated. In fact, it's quite straightforward. See, what happens is, especially in labor-intensive environments, people learn, right? Humans learn, and therefore, in many of these industries, as they repeat the same task, the time taken for that task, on average, is reduced. So they don't take the same time. If they took 10 hours to manufacture the first unit, because they learned, they don't take 10 hours to manufacture the second. They actually take less. This is what we call the learning effect. And what that does is you will essentially see a slight fall of the average time per unit. So the average time per unit will slowly fall, but it won't just continuously fall because you will need that minimum amount of time end of the day. And it might, it might even go up and down depending on the mood and depending on how tired they are and depending on, what they feel and what kind of issues they have, etc., etc. But on an overall basis, in an ideal world, it will continue to fall and hit a certain peak efficiency level, and will when they are really familiar with it, it'll stagnate and it'll stay at that level. So that's where learning has capped. So what this does is the total time will essentially be a falling curve, or a curve with where the slope is expanding, because the total time that is taken for the cumulative number of units that you produce is slowly reducing. So the gradient will slowly keep falling. Okay, now this is all fine. What happened was that there came a requirement or a need to quantify this, to come up with a figure. How do you actually translate this effect into numbers? That's where the Wright's law came into play, which is something you've learned. And the Wright's law identified that as output doubles, so 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, the cumulative average time per unit falls by a fixed percentage. Falls by a fixed percentage. And this fixed percentage was called the learning rate. And to give you an example, what happens here is, in this example, to manufacture the first unit, someone takes 10 hours. And then to manufacture 2 units, ideally what should happen is 10 into 2. They should be taking 20. But in this particular example, this person, to manufacture the second unit, is taking just 8 hours. That means for the first unit 10 hours, second unit 8 hours, total time is 18 hours. So this person, we say, is learning at a rate of 20%, because their learning rate is 20%. They are able to manufacture the second unit or produce the second unit by using 80% of the time only. 20% has been learned and optimized. So this is the effect, and of course you can do it in cumulative basis, but this is the formula. It was translated into a mathematical formula called y is equal to ax to the power b. It's not a plus bx or anything like that. Y is equal to ax to the power b, where y is the cumulative average labor hours, a is the number of labor hours taken for the first unit or batch, first one, x is the cumulative number of units, and b is something called the learning coefficient, which is taken from the logarithm tables. B is equal to log 0.9% or 10% or whatever learning rate that you apply, divided by log 2. Now, of course, you can apply this formula and do calculations. I think there may be one example, one illustration done for you. So try out the example and take a look at the answer and how it has been done. You can use the steady learning point, because what happens here is learning stops, right? It keeps reducing at one point, and then the learning stops. So let's say someone learns until the 100th unit. Then from the 101st unit onwards, it's the same. It's the same time taken for the 100th unit. They've been learning from the first unit to the 100th unit. 100th unit learning stopped. 101, 102, 150, 200, 250, 300, 500, all of those units, they've been using the same amount of time they took for the 100th unit. How do you calculate the time taken for the 100th unit, which is the same time that is applied across the rest of the units that you are manufacturing? How is you use this formula y is equal to ax to the power b, and y is the total time. No, so you use the formula and calculate the time taken for the 100 total units. Calculate y for 100 units, and you calculate y for 99 units. Fair enough. You calculate y for 100 units, so that's the total time, and you calculate y for 99 units, and you get the difference. That is the time taken for the 100th unit. And that you can multiply by any number of units they've manufactured over 100 units. That's how you do it. It's a very simple calculation. Calculating the two y's and of the point where learning stopped and the one before that, and getting the difference. And that you can apply it to any amount of units that has been done or manufactured after the learning has stopped. So that has also been illustrated using an example which you can try out and which we can discuss in the live session if it is a concern. And that marks the end of budgeting and budgetary control. It's a huge chapter. There was a lot of content that was discussed. It's important conceptually. You have to be able to criticize traditional budgeting while also pointing out what's good about it, and propose the alternate budgeting, beyond budgeting concept as well. And in addition to that, take a look at the different forecasting techniques and what forecasting techniques are suitable at which point. This will be the ultimate skill that is tested in the APM exam. On that note, we wrap up chapter number 3, and I will be seeing you in a different video, maybe in chapter number 4. Good luck and thank you.